My name's Brandon and this is Nickelodeon Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Nickelodeon shows and retrospectively review them. As I covered in my first Jimmy Neutron review, the marketing push behind Jimmy Neutron was crazy. The way they carefully planned out the movie's release, merchandise, and then the launch of the TV show should honestly be taught in marketing classes. Naturally, Nickelodeon were keen to release a follow-up to the Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius game, but this time around, things were a little weird. Released on September 25, 2002, Jimmy Neutron vs Jimmy Negatron was released for the PC and GBA, but weirdly no home consoles. I'll be covering the GBA version for this video, and that was developed by Humansoft. They were in charge of the PC version of the Wild Thornberrys movie and the GBA version of Boy Genius, and would go on to develop iCarly on the DS. This version of Jimmy Negatron reviewed poorly, nabbing just a 5.5 average review score, which is actually higher than Boy Genius, but well below the other two Jimmy Neutron games we've got to come. I didn't like Boy Genius on the GBA, but with that experience under their belt, could Humansoft produce something solid here? Jimmy Neutron vs Jimmy Negatron is a trip. First off, the official name of the game is The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius vs Jimmy Negatron, which is pure insanity. The weirdness keeps on coming when you boot up the game and you're greeted by Jimmy himself, who gives you a tutorial for the main menu. Jumping into the game itself keeps this crazy train rolling as you're greeted by a 3D overworld. Oh boy, we are in for a treat here. So you'll wander around this overworld with no purpose because the game has given you literally zero direction or story before you end up stumbling into one of the game's worlds. The first world I found was Cindy's Dream. Without any explanation, I was suddenly exploring Cindy's dreams. As you head into the actual gameplay, you have the choice of playing as Jimmy or Goddard. This is a purely aesthetic choice as the characters control identically and have the exact same abilities. Don't adjust your screens, it's not just the overworld. We have a 3D platformer here on the GBA. The GBA actually had this really intriguing subculture of 3D games, which the awesome YouTuber Mini-Me has covered on his channel in quite great depth, so it's not completely out of left field to see something like this. However, seeing it done for a Nickelodeon game is shocking. I would not expect this level of innovation and ambition for a Jimmy Neutron game. Gameplay is pretty basic though. You can jump and you can shoot, that's about it. While it is technically impressive that Humansoft got a 3D platformer working on the GBA, the shine of that quickly wears off when you realise how much they had to sacrifice in other areas of the game. Firstly, movement is super clunky here, which is less than ideal for a platformer. Because of the inherent limitations of the GBA, your character's movement and the movement of the camera are both tied to the D-pad. This leads to many frustrating moments where you're just fiddling with the D-pad trying to do very basic things. And in general, moving through a 3D environment with a D-pad isn't great. Being asked to do precision platforming like this is honestly ridiculous. Lining up jumps or just running away from enemies and hazards becomes such a challenge in Jimmy Negatron. If this game was on home consoles, I'd imagine this challenge just wouldn't exist thanks to a more flexible and robust control scheme. So fundamentally, the game is limited because Humansoft decided to make a 3D platformer on a console not suited for that genre. But then they exacerbate these baked-in issues with very silly design choices. Why are they so obsessed with scattering random objects in the way of your platforming? It doesn't make the game harder or more challenging, it just makes basic movement a chore. Once you take your first bit of damage, you'll find yourself in a state of shock. Taking any damage randomly sends you backwards in the level. Generally, this is what happens in a platformer when you die, but here it just happens for literally everything. You haven't experienced true frustration until you've taken the most minor damage in video game history, only to be flung back to an earlier part of the level. A super cool quirk of this brain-dead design decision is that you can get unlucky and find yourself in a loop that will push you back to the start of a level without actually dying. Because of the way the damage system works, theoretically, you could be an inch from the finish line, get locked in a damage loop, and then get pushed back to the very start. Humansoft clearly didn't try to get too complex with the coding behind this system, because it regularly respawns you on top of or right in the path of enemies. I guess I should be grateful they were smart enough to not allow players to respawn over bottomless pits. Funnily enough, this weird quirk swings all the way back around from being awful to being sort of helpful in some situations. Levels aren't exactly linear here, with most of them, particularly the later ones, featuring a number of branching paths. The goal of every level is to collect 10 things, activate 10 switches, or defeat 10 enemies. When you have to branch off the linear path to do this, killing yourself is actually the quickest way to get back to where you want to be. I can't imagine anyone is actually speedrunning this game, but this would be an effective strat. Initially, you can only access 3 worlds. Once you've played through all of the levels, there's 3 in each world, and you defeat the obligatory boss battle, you unlock another set of 3 worlds. This results in 9 worlds total and 27 total levels, before a final boss level as the finale. Humansoft do a pretty good job of keeping the themes of these levels quite unique, combining typical space and sciencey levels with interesting setups like time travel. The time travel area was a little confusing though. Why are these dinosaurs shooting lasers? Speaking of enemy encounters, ooh boy is this game tricky. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is one of the toughest games I have ever played, and again, a lot of it comes down to very strange design decisions. As I mentioned, the mere fact that it's a 3D platform on the GBA makes controlling the game very tricky. And then you've got bizarre stuff like the game penalising you for exiting a level. Why do I lose a whole ass life for exiting back to the overworld? I actually found this out the hard way as I wasted my final life doing this. Thankfully, the game has a pretty robust password system that saved me. The biggest design flaw might be that Jimmy's attack has massively limited ammo. So much of the gameplay here hinges on you being able to shoot, yet your ammo runs out so quickly. Technically your ammo is unlimited as it never fully drains, but when it's in this state you can shoot 1 bullet every few seconds, making it pretty much useless in a game where it is so hard to successfully line up your shots. Some enemies take over half a dozen hits to bring down, so your ammo gets depleted in no time. Combine this with the fact it seems like your shots will often go through enemies or hit them and do nothing, and you're in for a very unenjoyable time. I was only a few levels in before I was at my wit's end. I decided to turn unlimited ammo on via GameShark code, and guess what? The game is so much more enjoyable to play. It literally feels like Jimmy Negatron was meant to be played like this. No, the gameplay doesn't all of a sudden become great or anything, but this one basic change almost makes it a bearable experience. I just can't see how anybody playtested this and thought it was fun. There was another section where I had to take matters into my own hands too. I came to a section where no matter how hard I tried, I could not successfully make this jump. My Twitch chat was stumped too, so I went in and modified the game with another GameShark code to beef up Jimmy's jumping powers. Next thing I knew, Jimmy was needed on his home planet. I don't know why this is a thing in the game, but I don't know how I would have progressed past this jump without it. I was completely lost. Now, you'll notice how, despite this game featuring Jimmy Negatron in the literal title, I haven't mentioned him at all. Like I said at the start of this review, you're just dumped into the game without an explanation or motivation for anything happening. This continues that way for like 99% of the game. You're never told why you're randomly jumping into these worlds or given even a hint as to what the conflict of the game is. There isn't a shred of narrative in this game. The actual concept of Jimmy Negatron is introduced into the game 5 minutes before the game is over. No, I am not exaggerating that. The idea of Jimmy Neutron is sort of hinted at. You immediately find yourself in the final boss world, and then you quickly battle him and it's all over. Calling a game Jimmy Neutron versus Jimmy Negatron and then basically never having Jimmy Negatron show up is one of the all-time troll jobs. To make matters worse, the boss battle is awful, and the ending is bizarre. You are cool boy. What? So yeah, this game is notorious for being really poorly translated. Humansoft were a Hungarian developer, so naturally the English isn't the greatest. They most likely had movie scripts and stuff to go off of for a lot of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, which would explain why there aren't any hilarious translation shenanigans there. But Jimmy Negatron, these errors are the most fun you'll have in the game. Honestly, if this is the extent of their English, I can see why they'd be hesitant to include any sort of story in the game. Jesus Christ, THQ and Nick, throw them a bone and get them a genuine translator. And while we're at it, can you guys fund the eye surgery I'm going to need after playing this game? Good lord, is this ugly. Humansoft had to cut back on so many other areas of this game to make the 3D work, and one of them was clearly the graphics. Almost everything in Jimmy Negatron looks like a blurry, jumbled mess. Environments are downright ugly and sometimes painful to look at. The final level in the maths-themed world is so abrasive. Figuring out what the enemies you're fighting are supposed to be is a challenge as well. I could swear I was fighting Grimace from McDonald's here. I am genuinely impressed they got a 3D platformer up and running on the GBA, but they had to make so many sacrifices that I would have just taken a generic 2D platformer instead. At some point, the ambition is not worth the compromises. Once again, I'll give Humansoft credit for being ambitious. I'm impressed by some of the things they achieved here. But is Jimmy Neutron vs Jimmy Negatron a good game? No, far from it. A game in this style is so clearly not meant to be played on the GBA, and they've had to ignore so many crucial aspects of making a great 3D platformer just to get it working. Then you have a mountain of brain-dead design decisions making the experience damn near unplayable. I'm still in shock over the weird damage respawn thing, and the decision to make ammo so limited that fundamentally breaks the game. It still wouldn't have been any good, but giving you unlimited ammo would have improved the experience tenfold. Overall, I definitely wouldn't recommend Jimmy Negatron, not even over Humansoft's last Jimmy Neutron game, and that had a section where you could just get completely stuck in a level with no way to progress. Next time I'll be covering the highly anticipated Nickelodeon Party Blast. This comes at a convenient time as Nickelodeon just announced their own crossover Smash Bros clone. Could this crossover title produce some Nickelodeon themed fun? Hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out.